The Tennessee Titans have gone from one of the worst cornerback units in the NFL to having a top 5 group. I'll break it down on today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast.
You are Locked On Titans, your daily Tennessee Titans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Titans podcast. I am your host, Tyler Rowland. Titans fans, today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. On today's show, we are going to continue our positional preview series. We are breaking down the cornerback group, and this may be a strange thing for Titans fans to hear, but the Titans have a top 5 cornerback room. Great thing to say. I'm going to break down the top guys at the position for the Titans, the locks to make the roster, talk about some of the bubble options like Gabe Jeudy-Lally, the undrafted free agent from Tennessee, and sadly, we'll talk about how I do believe this is the end for Caleb Farley with the Titans. Before we get into all of that, though, do want to thank you for making the Locked On Titans podcast your first listen each and every day. Remember, Monday through Friday, Tennessee Titans content all year round, always for free. You're not going to beat that anywhere else. Make sure that you get subscribed, stay subscribed. It's your team every day here on the Locked On Titans podcast. Speaking of every day, we are going to continue our positional preview series throughout the rest of the week. Tomorrow, we're going to do interior defensive line. Then we're going to do the edge rushers. Then we're going to do the linebackers. And then next week, Tennessee Titans training camp kicks off. I'm going to have my 53-man roster predictions to start next week. Can't wait to dive into all of that with you guys. So again, make sure that you get subscribed, stay subscribed. It's the #1 Tennessee Titans podcast in the world for a reason. So make sure that you don't miss out. Also want to let you guys know, since we're talking cornerbacks today, my film breakdown on Roger McCreary, who is an elite slot cornerback in the NFL, is going to be up on the Tic Tac Titans film channel on YouTube on Tuesday morning at 8 a.m. Eastern time. The link to that is down in the description below of the show. I hope you guys check out that film breakdown on the other channel. But talking about this corner group, obviously the Titans add L'Jarius Sneed in the trade. Excellent trade, widely praised for the trade. The Titans only gave up a third-round pick in 2025, and the contract wasn't really that rich for L'Jarius Sneed and what he showed last year. Also, you had Chido Awuzie, which at the time when Chido was signed, we were like, okay, that's going to be the Titans' #1 cornerback next year, and I think everybody was generally okay with that. Like, Chido is a good player. When healthy, he could be a very physical press corner, can do it all on defense. So I was pretty happy with the Chido signing anyways. But then you add L'Jarius Sneed to that and bump Chido down to cornerback 2. I mean, this is a guy who was a #1 cornerback for a Super Bowl run, and now he's the Titans' #2 corner. And then you add that to, again, Roger McCreary, who I really want to focus on here, because McCreary is a guy who is generally underrated. And Titans fans have kind of figured it out now, but now the national conversation is starting to figure out. But I will say there are still some Titans fans who don't quite recognize how good Roger McCreary is. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that it's not like he's in the spotlight a ton because people don't really attack him. For my film breakdown for Roger McCreary, I went through every single snap that he played last year, all 17 games, and he played a lot of snaps. It took me quite some time to go through all that tape, but it's hilarious how Roger McCreary just doesn't get challenged a ton on a week-to-week basis. Like, teams just aren't going after him. They're kind of looking to the other side of the field. He's just so sticky with his coverage. He's going to be in the hip pocket all the time, and I think outside of just the ability to play man coverage, the understanding of zone awareness, if he plays zone, he really does a great job of getting to his spot and understanding route concepts and who he needs to pick up based on where he's at in the zone and the people around him, what they're doing in their areas. He's got the man coverage ability. I would say that's his #1 ability. He's so good in man coverage. But he also gives you a level of physicality from the slot position that is 100% necessary in the NFL. So a lot of people, I find, worry too much about base defense, 3-4, 4-3, when the reality is most of the NFL is playing in nickel and sub packages for most of the game. The Titans are playing in nickel with 5 defensive backs, far more than they're playing with their base defense out on the field. It's not really even close. So when you do that, you got to have a slot cornerback who can also sort of function as a pseudo linebacker, because what the Titans would do is they would be a nickel. They would have 4 down linemen. They would have 2 linebackers, and then they have their 5 defensive backs with 3 cornerbacks. But a lot of teams have formation versatility. They could come out in 3 wide receiver, but one of their wide receivers is a big guy. Think about like Jawan Jennings from the San Francisco 49ers. Think about Nick Westbrook-Akine. That may be a 3rd wide receiver, but NWI can function as a tight end. And nowadays, with how positionless football is starting to get more popular, you got guys who can function as a wide receiver and as a tight end. So when you have that, if you have one traditional tight end on the field and a big slot who can slide into the formation and block, you're going to need to have your slot your slot cornerback as somebody who can, again, function as a pseudo linebacker, fit in the run game, come up and make tackles, play with physicality. And Roger McCreary's ability to do that was impressive. And one other thing that really stood out to me on the tape was his ability to attack screens. If you throw a wide receiver screen, if you throw a quick tight end screen, if you're running a running back screen, Roger McCreary's awareness allows him to sniff that out quickly. And then the physicality allows him to go make a play and actually make a difference. There is a play against the Indianapolis Colts that I can remember where they set up a running back screen, and they literally had 3 monster offensive linemen on one side of the field with the running back setting up the screen, and the only guy over there was Roger McCreary. He comes up, he chops his feet, he dives underneath number 77, one of the linemen coming after him, and he makes the play. It's Roger McCreary versus 3 full-size offensive linemen. And Roger McCreary gets through and makes the play and stops the screen from being a big gain. So things like that are just, he's a football guy, and you add that to the ability in man coverage. Now, look, on the outside, he's going to struggle. He's never going to be somebody who can thrive and succeed on the outside. He's too small. His arms are too short. And if you go back and look at the tape where he had his worst games, Tampa Bay, it's funny he had the interception against Tampa Bay, but that might have been his worst game of the year because he was on the outside trying to guard guys like Mike Evans. And that's just not going to be conducive to success for Roger McCreary. So you get him in the slot, you add him to Chido, you add him to L'Jarius Sneed, you let him play and do what he does best inside. And again, the Titans have a top 5 group. I would also say another lock to make this roster is Jarvis Brownlee Jr. I love JBJ. Liked him out of Louisville. He does remind you of L'Jarius Sneed a little bit. He's not quite as big as L'Jarius Sneed, but so physical, so feisty, press coverage, in your face, jamming you at the line. Like, I think that Jarvis Brownlee Jr. in the 5th round was a great pick, and we've heard little things recently that he was pissed that he didn't go in the 3rd round. Either his agent was giving him bad information, teams were giving him bad information. Either way, Jarvis Brownlee Jr. was furious that he was taken in the 5th round instead of the 3rd round. I think he said recently he wasn't happy when he got drafted because he got drafted so much later than he expected. But hopefully he uses that fire and uses it to be the best player that he can be, and that can only help the Titans going forward. So with those people as your top 4 cornerbacks, again, I think the Titans have a top 5 group in the NFL. And based on what we've seen at cornerback for the last forever as Titans fans, it is quite the breath of fresh air. But that's only 4 cornerback spots. The Titans are definitely going to keep more, and there's a lot of guys on the bubble that you've heard of, but there's one player who's an undrafted free agent who I think has a great shot to make this team. I'll tell you who it is next. Before I do, though, do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. All right, look, guys, you've heard the phrase before, but comparison is the thief of joy, because you're looking on Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, Twitter, and you see other people's highlights of their life. But in reality, they don't have it all together like they act like they do. And therapy can help you focus on what you want instead of what others have, so you can start living your best life. If you're thinking of starting therapy, you got to give BetterHelp a try. I've worked with BetterHelp before. It was an enjoyable experience. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient. It's flexible. It's suited to your schedule. And all you got to do is fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist. And you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge, which I think is a great feature as well. Stop comparing and start focusing with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon and get 10% off your first month today. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Titans fans, let's continue today's breakdown of the cornerback position as part of our positional preview series heading into Titans training camp next week. We just talked about my locks to make the roster at cornerback with Sneed and Awuzie and McCreary and Jarvis Brownlee Jr., of course. But now I want to get into the bubble guys. Before I do that, I want to thank you again for making Locked On Titans your first listen each and every day. Remember, training camp is around the corner. It starts next week. And I'm the only podcast out here putting out daily content for you guys all year long. So again, get subscribed, stay subscribed. Also, the Tic Tac Titans film channel. That's where you want to be as a Titans fan this football season. And I got a Roger McCreary film breakdown going up on Tuesday morning at 8 a.m. Eastern time. Again, at Tic Tac Titans on YouTube. I hope you guys will check that out. I definitely do appreciate it. But with that being said, let's talk about the bubble, baby, because this is where the real interest happens. I think anybody out there could tell you who's a lock to make the roster. But when we talk about the bubble, you got to start with two guys who played games for the Titans last year. And number one is Trey Avery. All right, Trey Avery's played in 29 games for the Titans over 2 seasons, 5 starts. He's had 62 tackles, 11 pass breakups, 339 special team snaps as well. So a guy who could definitely help you on special teams. He's 5'11", 180 pounds. So a little bit of a smaller cornerback. 5'11's all right, but the 180 is definitely small in terms of weight and size. Look, here's the reality though. Trey Avery was a guy who we saw him in his rookie season, and there were flashes. Thought, hey, maybe this guy could turn into really good depth. But the reality is last year, when Trey Avery was out there, he did not play well. Okay. And I think back to like the San Diego Chargers. They'll always be the San Diego Chargers to me. I think back to the Los Angeles Chargers game in week 2 when Christian Fulton went out with injury, which shocker. But Trey Avery just got abused, man. It was hideous. I mean, over 100 yards, both the touchdowns. You look at week 16 against the Seattle Seahawks. Colby Parkinson caught the game-winning touchdown over Trey Avery and just little babied him. Like Trey Avery was there, and Parkinson just jumped up and grabbed it, and it wasn't even close. It was just one of those too small moments. Look, Trey Avery is a guy who we had high hopes for, but he was an undrafted free agent for a reason. And I think the reality is that while he had good stints, I just don't think that he's a guy that the Titans absolutely have to have on the roster. When you have 4 guys as locks, like we explained in the first segment, you're only going to have a couple of other spots, maybe 2 spots at maximum. The Titans aren't going to keep 7 cornerbacks. Okay, that's simply not going to happen. They're going to keep 6. And when you look at Avery, he's not a guy who plays in the slot. So if you're the Titans and you have Sneed and Awuzie who can play outside, JBJ can play in the slot or a little outside. McCreary obviously is a guy who I think needs to play in the slot. So now you have 2 dudes who can play in the slot. You have 2 dudes who can play outside. You need one guy who can play outside and then one guy who can play in the slot. That seems like, so you have at least 3 people at both spots that you can play at all times. Maybe the Titans would rather do 4 guys who can play outside, and then you have JBJ and McCreary who can both play in the slot. But I just don't know if Trey Avery has a spot on the team. I think right now he's still high on the bubble. I think if you did your 53-man roster predictions, Trey Avery would get that 5th spot, but I don't think he's a lock by any means, and that's why he's here in the bubble section. And I just don't know that he's a good enough player to make the roster. The Titans may look elsewhere with a new regime and a new coaching staff. Another guy who's kind of in the same vein is Eric Garrower, who was an undrafted free agent last year, played in the slot primarily. He needs to be a slot guy. He's 5'8", 174 pounds. So a small guy. Played in 12 games for the Titans, had 22 tackles, 2 PBUs, only 36 snaps on special teams, though. Look, when you look at NFL special teams units, you need guys who are big and fast. And Eric Garror at 5'8", 174 pounds, he's just not a guy who you really want on your special teams units consistently. He's too small. So with that being said, and the fact that he's basically primarily a slot guy, the addition of JBJ to me kind of ruins Eric Garror's chances mostly. I mean, I'm not going to say that he's a long shot. He's on the bubble here. He could make it if they want another slot option, but I don't know. Again, I feel the same way about Eric Garror as I do Trey Avery. They could make the team. I could see that, but I just don't think they're talented enough guys to be on an NFL roster at this point, and definitely not who I like the most out of this group, because who I like the most out of this group is an undrafted free agent out of Tennessee. Vols fans rejoice. They're pandering to you. Jokes aside, Gabe Jeudy-Lally was one of the most impressive players in Titans OTAs in the early summertime. He made a name for himself. He was aggressive. He was physical. He had some plays against DeAndre Hopkins and stuff. This is a 6'1", 190 pound corner, 189, 190, whatever. Same difference. Eat a bag of Chidos and you're 190. Gabe Jeudy-Lally is far bigger than both the other guys we talked about in the bubble section. Trey Avery, 5'11", 180. Eric Garror, 5'8", 174. 6'1", 190. So 2 inches and 10 pounds heavier than Trey Avery. I think if you're going to keep somebody as an outside cornerback, that Gabe Jeudy-Lally, that's kind of a tongue twister. Gabe Jeudy-Lally, you could switch that around pretty big. GJL isn't really easier to say. Honestly, it's a bit of a tongue twister too. But Gabe Jeudy-Lally is bigger. And I think when you're putting together, you guys know if you've been listening to my show for any time, I love variety within position groups. All right. I want my wide receiver group to look like a basketball team. You got the big, tall guys, the short, small guys, the mixture in between. Running backs, I want scat back. I want a power back. I want different varieties. I don't want too much overlap. You can have a little bit of overlap, no lie, but I don't want too much overlap. I like to have a variety of types of guys within my position group. And I think Gabe Jeudy-Lally is the big, physical, tall cornerback. Could be huge for the Titans down the line. If there's 2 injuries. Say there's 2. Well, if you have JBJ, who could play inside for sure and has even said that I want to be in the slot. And then you have Gabe Jeudy-Lally, JBJ, GJL, hilarious. If you have both of those guys, now you have a primary backup for each spot who fits. You have your outside big physical cornerback in Gabe Jeudy-Lally. You have your inside slot guy, feisty guy, physical player, and JBJ. So to me, those are my 2 favorite options to take the other depth spots for the Titans. If they keep a 6th cornerback, then maybe you slide Trey Avery in there. That can make sense. But I really like Gabe Jeudy-Lally, and I think even though he's on the bubble, he has a great shot to make a name for himself and make the roster. That's what I'm looking for. But one name that I haven't mentioned yet is former first-round pick Caleb Farley. And as much as I feel bad for Caleb Farley and the way things have gone the last few years, the reality here is this is probably the end of the road for Caleb Farley. So we'll talk about that next. Before we do, though, do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Look, Game Time is the best place to buy tickets, and with it being summertime, it is the perfect time to go to a Major League Baseball game. I have a ton of good memories of going to Major League Baseball games during the summer. It's a great experience always, and the best place to create that experience is on Game Time. They have the best features in the industry, period. You get all-in prices on your tickets, so you actually know what you're going to pay when you look at the price of tickets. You get a panoramic view from your seat, so you know what you're going to be looking at when you sit down. And they have the Game Time guarantee that makes sure that you pay the lowest price possible. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNFL. That's LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Titans fans, let's cap off today's breakdown of the cornerback position for the Tennessee Titans as we head into the last week before Tennessee Titans training camp kicks off. That'll be next Tuesday. They're in the building, and I believe next Wednesday is the first practice for the Titans. Cannot wait. I'm going through all of the positions. I've gone through the entire offense last week. Check that out if you missed it. I went through cornerback or safety yesterday, cornerback today. My Roger McCreary film breakdown comes out on Tuesday morning on the Tic Tac Titans film channel. Tomorrow, we're doing interior defensive line, then we're doing edge, then we're doing inside linebacker. So hitting all these positions before the end of the week, and then I'll have my 53-man roster prediction at the start of next week before training camp actually kicks off. Also want to let you guys know that Locked On launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. It's on YouTube. It's on Amazon Fire TV. It's called Locked On Sports Today. Locked On Sports Today is here for you again, 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day. You get local experts from Locked On, coverage of every league with our national shows. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on YouTube and on Amazon Fire TV. But again, this makes me feel bad. You know, it does make me feel bad. Look, here's the reality. I criticize players all the time. I say they should be cut. I say that, and I don't feel bad about it. All right. You play in the NFL, you're in the entertainment industry. This is what comes with it. It's like all the crap that I have to take online all the time. People saying all kinds of crazy stuff to me that you would never say to somebody in person. The reality is I don't like it, but that is part of the gig. That is part of being in the public eye as you put yourself out there. So I don't really feel bad when I say, hey, trade Treylon Burks. He's a ghost. You know, I don't think he's very good. Like, hey, that is what if you don't want to do that, go be a janitor. You know, go be a garbage man. Go sell insurance. Like, there are other jobs where you aren't in the public eye that you won't take criticism. Okay, so go do that if that's what you don't like. But when I criticize Caleb Farley and I say that he shouldn't make the team and that he's not going to make the team, I genuinely do hurt inside because it's hard to find. It would be hard to find a player who's gone through more adversity in their first 4 years in the NFL than Caleb Farley. Like the injuries, back ACL, year 1, back injury, year 2, miss all of year 3. Mother dies of cancer. Father dies in a house explosion. Your house explodes, period. You know, just like it is truly tragic. And I just hope that one day he can find peace. But regardless of all of that, and regardless of how, much my heart hurts for him, the Titans just can't waste a roster spot anymore. Last year, I said keep Caleb Farley on the roster. It's kind of like how I talk about Treylon Burks this year, because you would have cost yourself cap money if you got rid of Caleb Farley. But now, and we're past June 1, the Titans could save some money there, or at least it won't hurt the salary cap. I guess it's like $4 million, something like that. It's not going to hurt the salary cap. The money's already paid. But just, is Caleb Farley going to be a better player than Trey Avery? Is Caleb Farley going to be a better player than Gabe Jeudy-Lally? Is Caleb Farley going to be a better player than even another guy here in the long shot category and Tay Gowan? You know what I mean? Like Anthony Kendall. Is Caleb Farley better than those guys? Sadly, no. Sadly, he's not. Now, I hope with every fiber of my being that Caleb Farley, who's been out there at OTAs and actually able to practice, that he can stay healthy through training camp and at least get himself some reps, some opportunity, get comfortable again, have the chance to do that. I hope that he can do that. But the odds are that's not going to happen. I mean, he's played 12 games in 3 seasons, 14 tackles, and Caleb Farley isn't going to be a special teams contributor. He can try. They're trying to make it worth it. The Titans tried to do it last year, but like, that's just not what his game is. He's not overly physical. He's a size speed guy who you're hoping could make plays on the ball at cornerback as an outside boundary guy. he's just not going to be a special teams dynamo. That's not the way this is going to go. So sadly, I feel bad saying it, but I just think this is the end of the road for Caleb Farley. And since it makes financial sense to cut bait, I have a hard time seeing him making the team. Now, maybe the Titans just take a chance on it. They're just like, hey, whatever. We're going to keep him around. Like, we'll bring Sneed, Awuzie, McCreary, Jarvis Brownlee Jr. We'll keep Gabe Jeudy-Lally as our fifth guy. And then we're just going to keep Caleb Farley around this year and see if we can make something happen. You know what I mean? I don't think that would be insane, but new regime, new coaches, his first 3 years. I think it's just time to move on and give that spot to somebody else who honestly is more deserving. But other names here that I think are long shots, Tay Gowan, been in the NFL for a few years now, hasn't really found a home. Robert Javier, undrafted free agent out of Townsend. He's 5'11", 190. Again, I just think there are too many guys. You have JBJ and Eric Garror, who I think would be ahead of him there. Anthony Kendall. Anthony Kendall is an interesting one, was an undrafted free agent for the Titans that made the roster out of the gate last year, but never got in any game action. And I just think there are too many people ahead of him here to try to count him as anything other than a long shot. But the reality is the Titans have a good cornerback group this year, and I think they can have some good depth with some of these bubble options as well. What happens remains to be seen. Excited for training camp to kick off tomorrow. I'm going to be talking about interior defensive line, and it's time for T'Vondre Sweat to step up. Big Jeff is elite, and I really, really don't like the depth on the interior defensive line. So I'm going to get into all of that. Also, again, the Roger McCreary film breakdown is out at 8 a.m. on Tuesday morning on the Tic Tac Titans film channel here on YouTube. I really hope you guys give that a listen. I get, 5,000, 6,000. I got, nearly 13,000 subscribers on this channel. I only got like 2,000 on that one. So I hope everybody who listens to the podcast will eventually go check that out because I would definitely appreciate it. But that is going to do it for me today, folks. As always, I am your host, Tyler Rowland, and this was Locked On Titans.